patrol for the last half of my career was rats.
Yeah, that's what I was just saying. We've had a lot of, yeah. Sanitarians seem to know a lot about rats and mice. Peter, do you think we should, can we start up? You think?
You're good to go now.
Thank you, Peter. Okay, guys, this would be pretty, I don't think it's going to shock anyone. We're just going to go through the survey results, but I don't have any opening remarks. The next meeting, we're going to have to come together after we draft something, send it out and kind of go over it. I did not ask Peter this, but Peter, is there any time available on next Wednesday? I know we normally would have our main group meeting, which is what I was trying to stay in that time to be sensitive to those who, have to work between 2 and 3. I do believe it would have been scheduled for a whole group meeting. Peter, do you have 2 or do you have like 3 o'clock, or I don't know, with the rest of the group? Would you rather try to do it before, after? Would you try to have a different day? We do need to try to get one in next week if possible, because we only have like 2 weeks left, 2 or 3 weeks left on this. Does anyone have a problem with it after 2 on Wednesday? Okay.
Nope.
Maybe Peter, do you think we could, if there's a 2 to 3:30 or 2 to 4 block, in case we can go piggyback on the main group's meeting?
Would you be able to push it back to 2:30?
I would. Is that okay with you guys? Yes, I'm good too. Can we do 2:30 to 4 if that's possible, Peter?
Yeah, that works.
Perfect.
Which day? Sorry, I missed that.
Wednesday, a week from today.
Okay.
I personally won't be available on Wednesday.
Yeah, I won't be
next
available
week.
either.
Okay. Do you guys have anything early in the morning? I mean, I know because now we're getting down to like stuff.
Yeah, I can make something work in the morning.
Does everyone else have
Ideally, but like if yeah, like 9 to 10 would be good for me if that works for other folks.
Does anyone have an issue with 9 to 10 on Wednesday, a week from today? Tom, I can't hear you. You're on mute. Bob's cool. I'm cool. 9 to 10 on Wednesday. Tom? No?
That's
No.
okay. I'm just one person. Don't worry about it.
Well, we'll catch you up too. I mean, I think we're going to have a lot of stuff kind of figured out before that meeting anyway. So, okay. So, okay. Peter, do we have that available 9 to 10 on Wednesday morning?
Yeah, that would work too.
All right. Perfect. All right. We'll see that. Okay. Check. All right. The next thing is the discussion of the survey results. I'm just going to go through them with you guys. Can you put that on the screen first, Peter? And just remember, some of these questions were like had a couple answers, so like the numbers aren't going to actually work out in every single one of these. And it was done just to get a consensus. And I honestly think as we go through the survey, we're only going to have I'm not going to have a lot to write about. We've got like 3 or 4 topics, and we'll discuss that going forward. This is the same survey, the same pretty much PowerPoint as I did last time, with a couple tweaks with adding that question as we had discussed for A and for B. I'm just going to go through results. So Peter, can we go to the first slide? Okay. So there's a lot of others here, and I'll explain that. So there was a couple people that were not in our group. So as a sanitarian, no, I'm sorry. This is the next question. 7 other. Guys, I'm sorry, they were handwritten too, so I was going through each and every one of them. This one seems to be pretty 9 mandatory to obtain initial certification. I'm pretty sure a lot of us kind of agree on that we should have some field training in soils and training and field-based training. I don't think it's coming in as a shocker. As far as the every 2 to 3 years, those are the type of things that we kind of got to hone in and talk about today. So right now, as of question 1, it's just 7 and 9, meaning 7 people voted for yes every 2 to 3 years, 9 said yes every beginning initial, and a lot of them were the same, like they answered 7 and 9. Or sorry, I did not put A, B, and C, D, and E. The second and the third were obviously answered the most. Yeah, okay. So 9 mandatory to obtain initial certification, 7 for mandatory every 2 to 3 years. And we will talk about which way we want to go with the recommendation, or maybe it can be both. I don't know. Can we go to the second one? Okay, this is the one where I wanted to explain a little bit. So when I phrase the questions, as you sanitarians and anyone who works in the regulations know that it's phase 1. After you take phase 1, it's a certification. You get phase 1, you can do systems repairs. Phase 2, you can do engineer plan reviews. So we don't have a licensed septic inspector. We have licensed sanitarians. So yes, the language was a little confusing. I'll definitely own that one. from what I've always taught, we have these certifications to be septic, to do in septic inspections. So I think some of that language is a little different, because then we talk about in our next question, can you go to the next question, Peter? Then we talk about certified septic installers. It should be licensed septic installers, right? But they're doing the same thing. They're taking a class and then they're licensed. From what I understand, they do not do anything every 2 to 3 years, as we're talking about. This also was one that was pretty clear. Yes, mandatory every 2 to 3 years. And like I said, the 6 other, that was really because I did not phrase the question right. Licensed septic installers versus certified septic installers.
Sonia,
Go ahead, Bob.
forgive me, I'm on a different computer, so I can't find the raise the hand button.
Oh.
Septic installers do not have to take the course.
Okay.
They have to take the test, but they don't have to take the course.
That's interesting. Okay. And then that's in the regulation. I would not know. I don't know that section at all. Is that in the regulations?
Nope. No, but I'm one of the COWRA instructors and telling students all the time, you can take the course or you don't have to. You can study the book and take the test on your own.
I did not know that. We got to give us a curveball this late in the game, Bob. Come on.
We're pushing to have people come to the course. So, I mean, and we've got a very high success rate.
Okay. I really didn't know that. We definitely should have a conversation about that. Let's go through the rest of them, and then we definitely want to come back on this one, because I had no idea. I would have put that in the question survey. Sorry, guys. All right. So can we go to the next one? This was kind of all over the place. And honestly, I think a lot of these things, like a lot of them kind of just shows that we need to keep on having a conversation. You know, I don't necessarily think they're going to be in our recommendations, more of a long-term. Some of the stuff really needs to get thought through. Now, one of the things that I would suggest is that we encourage more soil scientists, at least, and I would like to hear what you guys think, but like when a sanitarian determines that technical complexities, that happens down here, and that's why we require them. I mean, that's kind of something that we do already. So I don't necessarily know how you guys feel, if maybe we want to encourage it more so, or actually put in our recommendations. So put that in the back of your head as we go through, and we will come back to that one as well. Can we go to the next one? All right, this is where I know we have a little bit of a differences of opinion. Go ahead, Dante.
Sorry, just to go back, just so, for my understanding on the topic of the soil scientists, are soil scientists like easy to find and hire if you're somebody who needs one? Like, are there any sort of barriers? I mean, I'm sure there's cost, but other than that, like, just so I can understand, like, if we were to get to a point where we were going to recommend somehow in some form to sort of strengthen this piece, whether in the regs or in some other way, I just want to understand sort of like what the sort of market for soil scientists.
So we have the perfect person to answer that, and that's Tom Stanfield, who is a soil scientist.
Awesome.
We're a dying breed. I keep hearing all the time that, you know, I left the health department after 30 years to reform my little soils consulting business. And in my first year, you know, it was nuts, and it's only going to get more busy because every engineer I talk to, every surveyor I talk to there's not soil scientists around. So there's no cure to that. I mean, the kids aren't going to school for this. There's no fix, but are they available? Yeah, I would say that in the typical realm of soil science, if you were going out to do some test pits, which typically would take 1 or 2 hours, yeah, I think the availability would be there. I think soil scientists would see that as something they would want to glom onto. And I don't know what the fees are going to be. Of course, that's probably a consideration, because we're saddling people with an additional fee. But as far as availability goes, you know, there's soil scientists in every corner of the state. I know them, so they're around.
Okay.
I'm not sure that helped you or not.
No, it does. I mean, because I'm just always cognizant of, like, you know, if we ask for some sort of expertise, like, does that exist? You know, I've come across this in other areas of our environmental health regulation where it's sort of like, well, you know, it's hard to recommend that because people can't find these guys. You know? That's all I wanted to understand. Thanks.
So, you know, and then that maybe goes to having it just encouraged in certain projects, and maybe even talking with Matt on how to explain that to sanitarians. If you're in a coastal area and you're not very good at reading soils, those 2 or 3 inches can make or break a project. And those are ones that are more critical, right? The other thing is too, is when it gets to a certain amount of sewage, that soil testing is so important. I
Yeah.
do think, however, that when we have this, having them do soils training in the very beginning and require it, I think that it's going to
Right.
help us out a lot,
Yeah, I was wondering that too. It's like if you can get at the problem in multiple different ways, right? In addition to considering this question of requiring a soil scientist, if some of the other recommendations might kind of help you in that goal. So it makes sense.
And I have to say that I actually had a situation where I had 3 soil scientists on one property. It was a very small property, so that can get a little interesting as well. So sometimes, like, I just having the soil scientist work with the sanitarian. Everyone's got some interest, developers, environment, everyone, but having someone that's almost impartial.
Yeah.
Definitely, sorry, not
I think
almost, definitely impartial. Go
Rob
ahead,
Miller would agree. I mean, you can get any number of professionals together and get different opinions standing right next to each other. It depends on what you're looking for out of this soil scientist as well. I mean, someone like you send me down to a coastal area, I don't see those every day. Do I rely on my training from 40 years ago? Well, you'd have to, but you'd want someone local too. I mean, you don't just want to grab me to go down to coastal stuff because I may not be your best resource. So it's an interesting question, getting this, these professionals out on these jobs, because you do get different opinions. So there's now something that we can look at, and this is a great curveball out of left field, if that happens, is Massachusetts has soil evaluators, and that group is my understanding, meets with the engineers, the installers, to evaluate the soils, and they are the ones that kind of have an important say. They're not necessarily soil scientists. They are people that have taken extra special training to become soil evaluators. So that program could be looked at to see exactly how that's functioning in Mass. I've been asked many times, are you a soil evaluator for Mass? I don't have that certification, but they're needed and they're sought out in Massachusetts. That might be a program we look at instead of soil scientist, soil evaluator, but you'd have to create that category.
That's a really good idea, Tom. Maybe we could put that as one of the long-term recommendations, because now I am asking you guys for would everyone, just like at least get this question out of the way, would everyone be okay on question 3 for us to put in our long-term recommendations about looking at the soil evaluator, and in the short-term recommendations that we explain to sanitarians that this is a tool that we can use, and encourage it in areas that they're a little concerned about?
I think it may be even right early, should a soil professional be required? And that opens the door to creating kind of a definition of what a soil professional is. Soil scientist, automatically soil professional. These soil evaluators from Mass could be considered a soil professional. So maybe it's the terminology that's too narrow, that would require too much of a demand. Maybe a soil professional might be a better term. I mean, I'm talking myself out of work here, but it may be, if we're going to look into other things, don't make it so tight that it's got to be a soil scientist.
Good point. Rob, go ahead, Rob.
Sure. I appreciate Tom's notion of maybe broadening the definition. I'm a little hesitant to do that because soil morphology can be, and soil profiling classification can be very complex. And soil scientists, certified soil scientists have the correct foundation of information to kind of make those determinations. And in my experience anyway, you get a couple of soil scientists in the same test pit, they're going to come pretty close to the same profile description, same identifications for restrictive layers and stuff like that. So for my part, I'm perfectly comfortable keeping it, as a certified soil scientist in the state of Connecticut. We've never had a problem tracking down a soil scientist if we've asked for one. on a particular project. We don't ask for them that often, but when we do, it hasn't been a problem. I mean, there are opportunities for interpretations to be different. I'm not denying that when you're looking at a profile. But I have no idea what's going on up in Massachusetts. Tom, you know more about that than I do. But just like you said, I'm sure, soils are different from one region to the other. And so individual scientists' ability to quickly interpret and describe a profile from some area outside of their region may be a bit challenging to them, but they're still going to have the basis of knowledge to, I think, work with and to make what would hopefully ultimately be an appropriate interpretation. And so I guess for my part, the bottom line is I'm comfortable with just keeping it as a certified soil scientist.
Okay, go ahead, Dante.
Yeah, this is a question not just about this particular survey question, but any of the survey questions where there's a range of answers. Like you look at this and it's like 5 for option A, people could have selected more than one. Like what's the plan for kind of presenting that and distilling it? Like,
So I was going to go through, so a lot of these I think are
Okay.
just going to be recommendations long-term and short-term. When it comes to the actual technical part of it, as we were going to go through, so for 2 of those questions, they're nitrogen environment questions. I want to send them over to them. We just want consensus. It's a majority agrees on certain things. And this is exactly what you were saying, Dante. We have numbers all over the place. So we kind of have a very wide view of looking at it. And what it tells me personally is that we need to look at it more.
Right.
It can't get resolved right now.
That's great. Yeah, just for
And
further discussion. Yeah,
I think we're going to end up heading up that way. But I can tell you guys too, on the shoreline, we use soil scientists a lot down here. And a lot of times the engineers bring them, I want to say protective, because it is very difficult. And if you get something wrong, a couple $100, I'm not sure how exactly much it is a lot less expensive than thousands and thousands of dollars for missing the restrictive layer, which could potentially happen with a repair. That's all I want to say about that. Go ahead, Rob.
Just quickly, my interpretation of the results here is that there's clearly a need for soil scientists, regardless of how you feel about the answer to this question.
True. Very true, Rob. Okay, so that would be, so is everyone okay with the short term? I mean, obviously we're going to write this all up, send this all over to you guys, and everyone's going to be cool. Thank you, Tom. So short term, encourage it, talk a little bit more with our sanitarians. Long term is soil evaluate, maybe even looking at the soil evaluator thing in Massachusetts. I'm probably going to call Sean out, but I'm pretty sure Sean in your program over there is a soil evaluator from Massachusetts, so you might be able to help with some of the what we're supposed to do.
he probably is.
I
know he's Massachusetts based, so
exactly. And I know a lot of the information I got was from Massachusetts when I originally. That's what pops up. So that's great. Okay, so that's one question then, guys. We can go to, actually, Peter, let's just go to 1 and 2. We can take this down as we go, because it sounds like we're just going to go right into the conversations versus the agenda where I had it separated out. So the first 3 questions, 1, 2A, and 2B, they're all kind of the same recommendation. They're probably going to end up getting grouped together. And like I said, that the one thing I would ask is, should it be to obtain initial certification? Should we go every 2 or 3 years? And do we want to separate the installers versus the sanitarians on how we write this up? Meaning we would recommend, based on this, to obtain initial certification, meaning you need to do some training in fields, elevations as well as soils, and then a program recommend for 2 to 3 years. We also are very aware that DP is going to need to create a program, and staff it. So I don't know how you guys want to handle writing these 3 recommendations up.
Would this be tied up with this continuing education, basically? Like you would have to do the soil and field-based stuff as if it's every 2 to 3 years, then it would be basically part of your continuing education requirement.
That's what I would think.
It could be like a package of recommendations, maybe.
Yep, those first 3. I mean, because we're all pretty clear on the fact that we need training, we need initial training, we need 2 to 3 years, and they all kind of go together. So we don't need to beat it down. Just have everything up in that last statement of you should do this to obtain. You should do this every 2 to 3 years. Recommendation, of course, with funding. hopefully attached. Go ahead, Tom.
Are you a
Just gonna-
spokesperson?
You said something, maybe Bob's got his hand up for the same reason of combining these two things. They're two different licenses, and I'm not sure that we can necessarily mandate another license requirement. I sticking to us, I think they should be handled separately. I think they should be handled sanitarians and licensed installers, because they have slightly different requirements. But combining these two, yes, mandatory every 2 to 3 years, and obviously mandatory at initial. I think those are your primary answers. So I just wanted to say, I don't think we should combine those two licenses, but maybe Bob has some insight on that.
Go ahead, Bob.
I think we should take the align with certification cycle out. Since there is no certification right now,
Right now.
that expression is confusing to people. We get it because we were talking about it.
Right.
When we send this out for general consensus. Okay. And I don't know that we can require CEUs for installers. We'd have to include that as in part of the new regulation. And
It would have to actually go in statute,
so
installed in the installer statute, but you could make a second recommendation that would change that specifically for them.
okay, so that we can't make the time frame that we've been given to write this in right now. We can make it a recommendation and pick it up somewhere down the road.
So how
Yeah,
about,
I think that the group is tasked with coming up with this type of recommendation. Like if the group wants to recommend that we pursue continuing education for the licensed cleaners and installers, that's a very clear recommendation. And the way you would implement that is through a statutory change, right? Like
Okay.
that's sort of in scope.
so
Yeah.
we could do the two, sanitarians, initial, continuing education.
Yep.
Other recommendation, septic installer, we recommend, I don't know how we'll phrase it. Bob, maybe you can handle that one, Tom, about how to write it, but a different way to phrase it. There
Yep.
was an interesting answer that quite a few of you wrote in about having a certain amount of inspections under your belt. I think that we didn't talk much about the installer stuff. We didn't. I know like Jim and Dennis have, so it would be a good conversation, but probably way too long for us right now. So even having a recommendation long-term about looking at the installer portion of the regulations, what do you guys think? Short-term, long-term?
I think
There's plenty of installers that install very few systems a year. So I suppose that would help get them reined in. There's plenty of guys that carry that license that have never installed a system. I mean, it's part of their excavating business. They get to write it on their truck. So I don't, again, I'm not familiar enough or feel comfortable enough that we should be meddling with the installer license also. I think when we look at just the sanitarians and septic inspectors, there is no certification, so take that wording out. But otherwise, I think our recommendation should be CEUs or something like it.
What about referring this section out to the code, whatever it's going to be, a code advisory committee for further discussion on the septic installer license certification, whatever it is?
Code advisory in CAURA.
Good idea. And that's a good point. CAURA definitely is a good point. Yeah.
And
What do you
there are,
think?
there's an awful lot of installers who are not members of CAURA, and depending upon, where they work in the state, Litchfield County, mostly Torrington Area Health District, primarily engineer design. So installers are not reading test pits. They're sitting on the machine.
True. So the soil morphology and the field elevation thing, that's not part of it. Yeah. So just the continuing education.
Soil morphology is field elevation. They know that they have to know for the installations.
Okay. So I'm just saying a consensus here, guys. Because I'm going to start writing them up for review. I'm going to just kind of going over it so I don't get it wrong. Then I'm going to say for this particular one that we agree that it should be mandatory training, soils field-based. that we recommend continuing education every 2 to 3 years. Would that be the correct way of saying it? Continuing educations. As for a longer term recommendation, that we refer it over to whatever's going to be made up. Code Advisory Committee, Kara somehow will state that and say that this should be brought up because it isn't, you know, something that we need to talk about. We just can't do it right now. Go ahead, Rob.
Sure. So it sounds like on the next question too, the consensus is going to be that there should be mandatory CEUs of some sort every 2 to 3 years. We at this point, you know, have not really delved into the weeds of what the curriculum of that specifically would be. I would imagine that, you know, probably you know, like that some soil morphology and site assessments is going to be part of that. And so I'm not sure we really necessarily need to say for soil morphology and field-based training every 2 to 3 years. I think it's going to be a bit redundant because it's going to be probably going to be part of the curriculum and the other question anyway. So I think as a minimum, we should say it's mandatory to get your initial certification. And then after that, the CEUs moving forward will cover whatever the industry think is most important at that time.
That's good. Is everyone okay with that? I like that. Good. Okay. The one thing I would like to possibly put in is that when you guys are training the program, because I am, you know, we're health directors and sanitarians, and all our sanitarians have to do a lot of training. So I know that some health directors may be a little concerned of how much time is needed to do that. So that as you're doing the training program, just to check in with us, because I don't want any of the health directors to be like, oh my goodness, I didn't know my staff now has to have another, you know, 2 or 3 things. Just, you know, go ahead, Tom.
We haven't said how many hours those are, and we can keep it low. I mean, you know, the class that's offered every couple of years from CHI is you know, 2 full days. Is maybe 1 day of that is, you know, the classroom portion is important. Maybe the field portion is important. If those are offered alternate years, you would get the whole program. But it's all going to come down to, you know, where's this getting paid for? So if you cut that down from a 2-day class to alternating classroom field work every other year, I mean, we're getting into the weeds on this thing, but there are ways to do that so that you can get the CEUs, and don't set it at 500 CEUs. Set it at, you know, 10, set it at 4, whatever you want.
I like that. Go ahead, Dante.
Yeah, and I would just say when you're articulating this recommendation at this point, it makes sense to keep it pretty high level, because obviously if this goes through, somebody is going to have to decide how many hours. Somebody's going to have to decide what the curriculum is. But if we want it to be, and you know, I work with a lot of the different professions, and it's, you know, it's nice to kind of keep it pretty high level and broad so that, you know, maybe the topics change, maybe you have a range of different things that would qualify. And so it would take a lot of further discussion really with Matt's team about sort of what DPH, you know, because if it counts, especially if we're talking about a licensed person, right? Like there needs to be oversight of sort of making sure that like DPH is on board with, you know, courses from different places, or is there only one course that's approved? Like who, you know, all of those decisions would need to get made down the line. So I think at this point, it makes sense to keep it pretty high level and then build out the details further down the line.
And I really actually like the way that Rob actually stated it. Rob, could you write that? Send it over and I'll develop into something. Because I think you're right. There's a lot more
Sure.
to talk about all this stuff. The only thing is I'm just, you know,
I
do
can
talk
put
about other
I
health
can put a
directors.
paragraph together for you.
I love that, Rob. Thank you. So, you know, I just want to make sure that we are aware, but it does sound like that would happen naturally as we go through and as you guys are doing the program. I know we talk to Matt and Sean and I mean all the time. So I can't see it not happening, in other words. But and to tell you the truth, those are the first 3 questions we've decided on. You know, just want to go through it. Septic installer, kind of its own little thing right now that we are recommending that gets taken a look at. And then Rob's going to send me a paragraph on what he just said verbatim would be great, Bob, for those 2 things, because that gives us our long-term and our short-term recommendation for initial training as well as continuing education. Does anyone have a problem with this? Bob?
Not a problem, a question. We've got a tie score. What were some of the other answers?
So yeah, it was set minimum projects, year of refrain, study to be done by new, yeah, so they were interesting, but they were all very similar. Something about a 10-year thing. So I think whatever it was establish a minimal level of continued competency, 10 projects per year. That was more than a few of the 7. There's talk about 10-year cycle. And that's probably based on something that's like national already, because these weren't from our committee, but they were all very similar. So I have a feeling it has something to do with, maybe it's a national thing. I'm not sure.
Okay.
So yeah. But I really wasn't sure what they meant, something with the 10 years. And there's a similar comment in the installers one too. So, okay. So that's
Well,
1, 2, 3.
just if I may, it sounds like some of those could easily be, included in whatever CEU framework and structure is ultimately determined, if that's where this goes.
You're right. Well, yeah, it could probably be a component. You need 10. Yeah. I'll definitely add that into, like, not our stuff, but when you guys are ready, I'll have something for DPH if they want it for some smaller recommendations like this. Just hey.
Yeah, and we're just always cognizant, I think, in all of our work, especially, in response to my previous question, like, there aren't that many soil scientists. Like, we don't want to ever impose a burden on folks who maybe do a range of different things, or, we want to balance any additional new requirements with sort of the public health goals we have, right? Like, we don't want to put any barriers, especially if it's a profession that, maybe we're having a hard time getting younger people into it and that sort of thing. So always balancing that.
And it's only for a short time if you think about it, because soon we will be all very good soil evaluators and we won't need soil scientists as much anymore.
Yeah.
Might lose them to the soil scientist field, but yeah. Okay, so we're done with the first 3 questions. Are we kind of in agreement, guys? All right. The 4th question and the 5th, 4A and 4B, I think this is where it's going to get a little. Okay, so the majority did state to transition to a code advisory framework like a codes and standards committee. I know we can write as a recommendation. I don't know how or where it's going to go. I would like your thoughts on that, but it was pretty clear that the majority, and this one wasn't one, like add as many as you want. This is kind of one of those ones where you just had to answer. I know DPH is going to and DEP are probably going to have other questions for it. So go ahead, Bob.
I think if we're going to throw this out to everybody to answer, we ought to clarify a little bit. Codes and standards similar to the building department. We all had the advantage of listening to your building official. There may be people who are going to answer this question and say, I don't know what that means.
So we had Johnny Carrier afterwards come in to the whole group and talk about codes and standards. I understand what you're saying, Bob, but I do think that this is one thing that all the group members have a firm handle on.
Okay.
I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that they seem to understand where we're coming from.
Okay.
I had made initially last time, I said, honestly, I was more concerned about something like this for AT. This is why we broke the question into 2. A lot of people answered this for the initial one. There's the next one, you'll see that I think there's more, or maybe possibly the same. If we're doing this, it's definitely not gonna be a short-term recommendation, guys. We know that. There's no way that you can all of a sudden set something like this up. This would have to be a long-term recommendation unless anyone else has any shortcuts on how to make it happen overnight, which I don't think is gonna happen in anyone's world. Honestly, Dante, actually, I'm curious what DPH and Deep think about.
So I can give you a few things. I mean, I think as far as your sort of next level question about AT, without like committing to the code advisory committee as such, obviously, if and when DPH ends up building an AT program, there will be a lot of consultation and advising sought across the board for stakeholders, right? Like we're going to need to develop maybe even a dedicated body of experts just on AT, right? That was always sort of in the back of our minds, like, well, we don't have the in-house expertise. Maybe there would be something that comes out of the code advisory that's sort of an AT advisory that then would help, review the individual technologies or whatever the program and sort of oversight approach is that we would take on if that happens. But it's so premature to really, so I think, DPH is super interested in having that kind of stakeholder expertise when it comes to the AT specifically. As far as the code advisory now, I think it's been clear throughout that DPH, the current, like, it's informal in the sense that it's not rooted in statute, right? And so DPH has sort of at its discretion operated this body. I think we want to keep that because at the end of the day, I think Matt's program has expressed that, even as it currently stands, there could be a lot more participation. So if we're not getting the full feedback and participation with the sort of discretionary model we already have, it's hard to, understand how it would be that much more productive if it was sort of structured like a codes and standards committee. My number one concern with the comparison to the codes and standards committee is that the functions are just different because the codes and standards committee looks at sort of pre-packaged sample model building codes. They don't have to come up with policy on their own. And so when we express concerns about conflict of interest and sort of creeping into the regulatory authority that the agencies have, that's not as much of a concern with the building codes and standards because first of all, everything that they do basically goes through regs review anyway. And so there's a check on their role in terms of coming up with policy, because obviously you're concerned about any time a regulated entity ends up setting its own policy, right? Like you don't want the industry to sort of have a role that takes over the regulatory agency. You're concerned about conflict. And so it seems to me that the Codes and Standards Committee has a couple ways that that's sort of offset those concerns. One is that, again, they take the sort of internationally accepted model codes that come out and are updated every however often they are. They review them, they make sure that it makes sense for Connecticut, and that's what they put forth for the most part, right? But then also, even though they're not considered regs, which is, great, similar to the way that we have technical standards, right? It's like you don't want to have to go through the whole regs process every time just because something needs updating because, it's too much of a burden, right? So they've created their own sort of quasi-regulatory process, but it still goes through the regs review committee. And so, I would just be very, I would be concerned about presenting a structure that looks like the Building Codes and Standards Committee for those reasons. It's just different.
What about a recommend, Bob, I know you have to raise your hand, but I said, what about a recommendation about just exploring it with DP, like similar to what we're doing right now, right? Long-term, not saying it's going to be codes and standards, but something similar to that as a long-term recommendation. I mean, obviously it's not going to be short-term.
I mean,
but
I
just a
think
discussion.
what we would want to understand, like from the DPH perspective, is like, what do you want to achieve that you can't achieve with the current structure?
Go into that once. I definitely have some opinions on that one. But Bob, do you want to say something before I?
I think this is absolutely going to have to be a long-term goal because Peter sent out one of the other committee's recommendations. There was a half a dozen of them or so. And it spoke to this, saying that they, whatever committee that was against this idea. So we're going to be fighting an uphill battle. So I think absolutely we had to set the sights. I agree with Dante, but we had to set the sights as very long-term because we're fighting a big wall, pushing over a big wall here.
And I think that whatever group or discussion could happen from this will help you guys create the AT because you'll have the stakeholders in the room together.
For sure.
So what about a long-term about exploring the options of this question for both regular AT, whatever, but right now, at least, the pandemic happened. Communication went down. We were all crazy busy. We're still all crazy busy. I understand what Matt was saying. There wasn't a lot of participation, but we were kind of all going bananas at that point.
Yeah, DPH too, obviously.
Oh, God, I was there. Yep. And I agreed 1,000%. And I think that some of the stuff is kind of like just what we need, that kind of wake up call. Let's come to the meetings. I will get another health director on that code advisory committee if it's the last thing I do. Rob.
Yeah. And
Just
so to
saying
your
that-
question, Bob, I think maybe a place to start is just let's sit down and think about how to make the existing code advisory committee better and more effective and more representative. And like, can we work within the fundamental structure we have now? It's basically an honor system, right? And maybe that's what folks are concerned about, like, oh, it could disappear. It's not going to disappear, right? I mean, I can't make any promises on the part of the way that DPH is going to be organized or funded or structured in the future, right? But as of right now, I think it's a great opportunity for everybody in this working group and DPH and the code advisory to get together and talk about, and maybe this is sort of what you're getting at, Sonia, with sort of a longer term recommendation, like what are sort of the problems with the way that the code advisory currently works, and can we fix those, by changing the structure or changing the way the meetings are done, or, improving, the way we communicate, like all that kind of stuff. Like I think DPH would be super on board with that kind of to start there.
No, I like that. Go ahead, Rob, and I'll say something.
So I just wanted to clarify, the numbers we're seeing here were provided by the full work group, right?
That's
So
correct.
this represents the position or the opinions of the full work group individuals. So majority of them are looking for, or plurality of them, if they are, depending on how many actually voted, are looking for the restructure piece. That being said, I was one of the two administrative formalizations, just in the interest of full transparency.
So I actually like Dante's idea. Let's make a recommendation to keep talking about this, that we can't solve it right now, that it is definitely something that we can look into, meaning it may be code advisory, we maybe go to codes and standards, but having a group such as this one with your your engineer, soil scientist, DPH, the same exact weird thing we're doing right now, but have a more in-depth conversation about this particular setup, code advisory committee, codes and standards, and just this question in general. We do a long-term recommendation, or it should actually short-term, technically, if we could start meeting and talking about it. I don't know if we can go and say we want codes and standards, because you're right, there's a lot of stuff that we have to still sort out. And maybe the code advisory can be saved by certain things. But some of the stuff that I would say for benefits and not, I would say benefits of it, there's other things that are like technical complexities, being able to go to a board where they can help rule on things. For example, coastal issues, if something's very, very technically complex, going to a board versus an appeal, when it could be a very easy question, not answered by D, because there's some gray areas in the technical standards. And I think that would be helpful if we could actually get some communication about how to handle those things. And there is a question all the way down here that everybody answered on that talks about like being able to see those decisions and stuff like that. So that's going to help no matter what with all the stuff. But what if we just put this as a recommendation to exactly what I said, have another group to discuss this specific question for now and for long term, and making sure Cower is involved in it too, because that's a big one too. So what do you guys think? I gonna write what you guys want me to write. Is everyone okay with it? They don't want it?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think our stance on this would be, are there ways that we can improve the code advisory as it currently is? So that's where we would want to start, rather than saying, let's scrap this and restructure it to make it look like, the codes and standards committee. We'd rather look at what we have now and how we can improve it before we get to that point.
So that could be definitely the short-term recommendation is meeting and making sure we can improve the code advisory as it is now. Is everyone okay with that, short term?
Mhm.
Yep, okay. I'll
Yep.
put that in. I'm sure I'll mess it up, but that's why we all work together. And then the long term, like I said, it is there. Just having a group to talk about it, because it will head into different things, maybe not necessarily under conventional systems. Go ahead, Tom.
I think I saw a note somewhere indicating that DPH wants to keep things status quo for now, at least. So I saw that note and I would support those guys because, well, I think it's important to have their support. So I'm not in favor of really rocking the boat too much, but a long-term study, I don't have a problem with.
Thank you. Does anyone else have anything to say? I'm good. Okay. So that's 4A and 4B. So can we go to 5? This is where we're going to start getting things that are going to start going quicker, guys, I promise. This is what I was saying. Yes, we all agree. We want to make sure that DPH is funded for this, though. Right. This is the one that like almost everyone agreed on. And I don't think DPH has an issue with it either. It's just making sure you guys have the staff and the funding to do it. You know, so and that could be the recommendation. Fund it, please. We're all the one thing that we're absolutely, except for the one person who I think didn't get the question right, you pretty much have. Yeah. Okay, so number 6, done. This one and number 7 are going to the nitrogen group. You know, we said how we felt as sanitarians, as DPH, as and proprietary owners and engineers, but I'm just sending it over to them. If you have any desire to look at the surveys, you're more than welcome to them. But this is what it was. And the other one was pretty much them saying, okay, we should just refer this to the nitrogen committee. And I have been on those meetings and they are doing a good job. This would be, we're not touching it, we're sending it over. Is that okay with everyone?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And what about the next one? 7 is the same thing. Same thing. The ground, this really does have to do with the shoreline. When you're doing groundwater monitoring during a high tide cycle, that's what we usually ask for. Instead of groundwater monitoring through the seasonal seasonal wet season, we do it through a high tide cycle or even a tide cycle in general. So that's already kind of there in what we do on the shoreline anyway. But again, this one isn't for us. But the one thing I do want to point out, it does show that we need to keep on looking, and I can't keep on drumming that in. The shoreline is changing. These are the things that I'm talking about. These are the things I'm concerned about. I know I'm not the only town on the shoreline that is concerned about these things as well. So there's not going to go there, but just something to keep in the back of our head that, the shoreline is changing. And that's pretty much our question. Go ahead, Bob.
Does every town on the shoreline do this? And is it a requirement in a local code, or is it just, hey, we would like you to, and if somebody pushed back at it, you wouldn't have much legs to stand on?
So Bob, a lot of the stuff that we do on the shoreline, because we know each other, the sanitarians and the health directors, WPCA, we kind of know each other. So some of the things that we do ask for down here probably aren't in the code because we have to worry about flooding. So like watertight rises to grade, watertight in and out, not just pump chambers, pretty much on anything that's coming on the shoreline because we're worrying about flooding. These are things that will be spelled out in our ordinance or WPCA ordinance, but they're kind of just, the engineers know to do it. You don't want your system flowed out. You don't want to have it inundated with water. So things like doing it wrong on tides, I don't think an engineer on the shoreline wouldn't do it. No one's going to say no, because they also want to know where the groundwater issues are. The one thing I'm saying though is having issues with how wet things are going and how high the groundwater is coming, and you have sandy soils, and it's very, very difficult to read redox in those soils. So like that's one of like our only things we can do, but the nitrogen group and the environment group, they are talking about some of the stuff. So, hopefully they'll have something that can kind of at least address the long-term look at some of these issues, such as rising water issues. But yeah, I mean, pretty much it's not that we require it. I don't think anyone would ever say no to it, just because when you look at the data on the shoreline, you're gonna be like, yeah, we should do this. Yeah. I don't necessarily need to know if it needs to go in the regulations. That would be kind of more the other committee. For us, it's it's out there and it's a concern, and I think everyone has now heard the shoreline is difficult, and these are one of the big ones. 18 to 24 inches in a 100-year flood zone and a nitrogen sensitive area. Well, I would probably tell them to do, we would work it out ourselves, but I would like more consistency with that, with others. And again, I can talk to our other health directors on the shoreline because it is different than the rest of you guys for the rest of the state. We shouldn't be tailoring it just for us, but yeah, that's how we handle it now, Bob.
Okay, thank you.
It seems to work in that part. Next, so that again, nitrogen and environment, not us. See, we're cruising here, guys. Next question. Okay, yeah, this is another one just like that. I am concerned on the shoreline, and one thing that I had mentioned in the nitrogen environment meeting, and I kind of wish somebody from Deep was on this too. What I was going to suggest is just to work with the ones on the shoreline that are under consent orders about some of these issues with nitrogen, because they are not for the rest of the state. You know, we are very much in an area. So B100A, everything down here, say predominantly, is a tear down, rebuild, tear down, rebuild. So nitrogen sensitive areas, it's more of a concern to put a lot of gallons per day on one site. But that's in sandy soils next to the shoreline, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be an area, nitrogen sensitive area where you guys are, where it would be a huge concern. So one of the things I don't even think we should focus too much on this question, but I do think that at some point, hopefully Deep and DPH will work with the health directors and the sanitarians down here on being on looking at B100A. Again, the questions were kind of the answers were all over the place. So if anyone else has any recommendations, I totally.
Sonia, is this one of those things where you'll have to remind me because this gets a little technical for me, where it's like the 100% reserve area? And is it the case that some jurisdictions require that?
So
Like a
B100A,
local jurisdiction could go above and beyond and sort of clarify that?
well, okay, so that's pretty much what I was going to go with, Dante. We have an ordinance, and in our ordinance,
Yeah.
and I know Westbrook's too, we are more
Right.
stringent with B100A
Mm-hmm.
because everything's a tear down rebuild. So
Right.
my whole thing was making sure that we're consistent, at least with Westbrook, Guilford, Old Saybrook.
Yeah.
You know, not saying that they have to, but at least a bar, you know, like if it's going to come back on us, at least we're all doing similar
Mhm.
things. Guilford is redoing their ordinance right now. We are allowed to be more stringent, but not contradict.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So
Right.
this, I don't want us to get in this, let's just start doing that, because that's what's going to happen. There's going to be an issue with building. People are going to go to different towns,
Mhm.
not going to know what's going on. So that's kind of more my question, is to be able to work with our water pollution control authorities when they look at their ordinances and just kind of make sure we're kind of on the same page, because when somebody comes back and is going to challenge something, it's either the regulations, that, you know, technical standards, or ordinance that can be more stringent. And
Mhm.
I don't want to go to Madison and B2 and us 4. And do you see what I'm saying? Just,
Yeah.
yeah. And then honestly, with you guys, but a lot with Deep, because it's their orders.
Yeah. Right.
So, and this is where I also go, where public health meets environmental protection. For us, it's environmental protection, not just public health, unfortunately, because of
Mhm.
those orders. So that's where it's going. And that the whole code is not for environment, you know, not for Deep. So I get that. So just, if anyone wants to keep it in, we can. I'm just kind of explaining my thought process with working on the shoreline. Don't have any burning desire to keep a recommendation in for this? No? Okay.
This is Rob. I mean, in the upland areas, I can't think of a project in which there was a tear down rebuild that was such a paradigm shift in the use that we'd consider the need to require 100% reserve on top of improving the project. So I'm not sure that piece of it. How
Rob, I think
applicable
you're right. This is
for the
more for the
upland
shoreline.
areas.
It really is. Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't have to do the whole code for that. So that's why it's like, let's at least talk to Deep. Maybe they can help us up on how to figure it, and at least we can try to be consistent with each other on these towns. So that's gone. And you're right, Bob, I agree. Bob?
Sonia, what if we were to tie this into a perk rate?
So less than 5 minutes per inch, you mean going to, well, but right now, less than 5 minutes per inch would go into 24 inches. I mean,
Correct. But, and I understand that,
yeah.
but it still doesn't trigger the 100% reserve area.
Yeah.
So if we say it's nitrogen sensitive, brand new assessment, coat 100% reserve area, where you get less than 5 minutes per inch.
It's a good idea.
And that way, you know, northwest corner, Rob's corner, we're not affected by it. You know, it's rare that we see soils like that, you know, possibly down by the river.
Yeah. And you're right. Like I said, it's only for some of us. And, maybe that is something that we can do, because we are redoing our ordinance right now. And
Right.
we have certain things like that. The one thing I have tried to shy away from in our ordinances is setting a nitrogen limit and doing anything that's like really a big drastic change from the code. Because for us it would be 24, we'd try to go for 36, and that would be a big change.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually have no idea. I'd have to talk to DPH. Would that be considered contradictory or more stringent? Those are the questions I'd actually have to talk to DPH about with our ordinance. Just, when we do our ordinance review, though, the last time we did in Westbrook, you guys were completely involved. DPH was completely involved. So the other thing I would recommend is that if we're all doing them ordinance changes, is that we all have like some kind of an area that we all know, which the developers can know what they're in for when they go into the town, because this is about building as well. And if you go from one town and it's this, and another town it's that, that's what I'm trying to avoid. But it does not encompass the whole state. You guys are absolutely right. We shouldn't have to put it in that category. This is really let's work with deep. And if the questions on whether it be contradictory going to 24 or 36 inches, we can definitely talk to DPH about that, how they feel about doing something like that. And if it's considered contradictory or more stringent, and if we should be able to do that. So, I mean, I like that idea, Bob. I think that right now, they'll just kind of push it out of the way for right now, if that's okay with the rest of the group. And then us lovely people on the shoreline can take it up with Deep and call DPH and try to work on that with us down here. And maybe the next time we have another code advisory committee, we'll have something tamped down to talk to everybody else about. So that was question 8. Anyone have any other thoughts on that one? Okay, yeah, question 8. Good. All right. 9. We're getting down to it, guys. 9. Thank you, Peter. Yeah, DPH, we all want you to have funding and lots of it. That's pretty much it. This is all going to go right over to the funding and process group. Not everyone's not as excited about deep, but the one thing I would have to say with large communities and system reviews is being with someone who actually has to deal with them, having a year wait time is not good, especially when you have failures and other things that are popping out with AT and large community systems. So, as they're talking about funding, they can only, just like with DPH, there's only so many engineers. And if you have that many projects, there's only so much they can do. So that was my little shout out for deep and increasing funding in that one particular category of large systems and community reviews, because I see that, and it is a long time, and it is not their fault. So that's 9. Just said, we're almost done.
I
Go
have to
ahead.
hop off for another meeting. I'm sorry.
Okay, but we're almost done, and that's fine. That's like the 3 things we've already discussed it. We're almost done. No problem, Dante. We're good. Bye. Detrimental, again, this kind of talks about if we have a code advisor or something else, we should have that conversation there. The one thing I was concerned about this is some of the answers that came back where they kept on saying DPH failure. Now, Bob, Tom, Rob, you guys know failures, surfacing sewage or backing up to the house, right? Then you also have failure when it's a real estate transaction. Is that a failure or is it a malfunctioning system? This is the one that's going to get us a little bit in issues. And this is the reason why I think we should talk to Deep about these things. And because I'm saying, if in their opinion such may occur, yeah, well, if I'm under consent orders, I'm going to think as a health director that it could be detrimental. Those are the stuff I don't want to get trapped into. Go ahead, Bob.
When I teach the Cowra class, I teach them very specifically what the difference is between those 2 definitions. And we at Cowra have been trying to standardize the inspection process for property transfer. It's difficult. We really got to get some support from legislative office building, but if we can get a uniform process, and there's that 5-page inspection document that's out there, but if there's a uniform process that is done and the language is very specific and taught that way, but right now you can be a barber from 8 to 4 and inspect septics for real estate transactions from 4 to midnight. There is no requirement.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Rob. And I think this is one of those things of, as we're talking about licensing for installers, maybe this should be put in that category, because something we didn't talk about, but it is something that happens to us all the time. We get called in, the system's failing because of this. Well, an installer said that because they checked your system, and then you have to go through the whole thing. No, I like that. I wish we had thought about that earlier, actually. But maybe it could be part of the conversation of when recommendation is when we're talking about installer CEUs, to put that in that
Sure.
thing, because you're right, it happens, and there is a big difference between malfunctioning, failing, and whatever detrimental effect on ground or surface water is. The detrimental effect on ground or surface water really is more of a deep, the way I was looking at it was the consent orders working with deep, and that's kind of why I brought it up for the B100A. These, I think that we need to hammer it down, what would be considered detrimental to ground or surface waters if you're under consent orders, and then for the rest of the state, because it's not going to be the same, right? So I really liked everyone's opinions that came in on here, because it does show how, say, all over the place we are, but how many ways you can define it. Just even saying that DPH failure. Well, if you're at a deep, if your sewage is coming out of the ground or if it's backing up, we've gone past the new development stage. The system's failing now. So I think a longer conversation needs to be had about this particular one, and maybe actually even something discussed in the code advisory committee. You know, that's all I was going to say about that. Go ahead, Tom.
No, I missed a lot of stuff and I apologize for that, but why are we discussing detrimental effect on ground or surface waters when it should be detrimental effect on public health?
True, but remember, you guys are talking about public health. We're also talking about environmental issues because we're under consent orders. Okay. So,
yeah.
I mean, again, that's what I'm saying. It should be separate. You know, I'm looking at it, but can you, again, if we're already under consent orders with having issues with our groundwater, a huge development could be detrimental to our ground and surface waters. I don't want to be put in that position. And that's what's been happening. I should, a third party engineer is going to come through and look at this, and they're going to say that it is detrimental to the ground or surface water because we're already under consent orders. You know, I've already had that threatened at me. I don't want to be in the middle. But at the same time, that's also something you guys really probably shouldn't have to deal with right now. Maybe I should just deal with it with deep on the shoreline. You know, yeah, that's kind of okay. Our issue down here again. I love being special. Sorry about that, guys. But at the same time, what Bob brought up was very, very important, and I think that we do need to explore that one. We'll have to put that in the recommendation because that is a very, I don't know about Rob and Tom or anyone, even Jim.
Well,
Dennis.
I'm curious, Bob, what do you tell the Kawa crew between the two definitions? I'm curious as to
Well, we go right through what it says in the technical standards.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And what I do is I'll make sure that they read it and we talk about it, they understand it, and that they use the language correctly.
Okay.
That's good.
Makes sense.
That's good. Yeah, that's what we get.
What does it say backing up into the house?
Yeah.
You can't find that in the code. It's only breaking out to the surface of the ground. And I was corrected by that by Matt because we had a failure in the basement. And he said,
you can find it in the code, just not in the technical standards or the subsurface regulations. It's in, it's in 109 or in 47A, right? It's in the
mostly under
it's in the other parts
rental
of the
properties. You're looking at rental stuff. You're not looking at a private home. If he wants to live in his own sewage, you can't stop him. So,
that's correct. Rental properties or any place where the public can be, right? Under 109, it's any public building, right?
So that's it. We all even had, the four of us who were all in the field already had like definitely different, not opinions, but look on it. And that's kind of what the way I was always taught.
But you're right. An owner occupied dwelling, they can live in their own filth as long as it's not affecting the people around them. At least,
But see, I would think as sewage as a public health concern and you're exposed to it, that would be an issue. Because we do hoarding situations where you're, in a situation.
Yeah, there's a whole argument there. Too.
Probably not one we want to go on since I think we're already over time.
That's a rabbit hole.
Four of us can talk about this for hours. We can bring up the rats too later on if we want. But it just goes to show that it definitely needs to be talked about a little bit more than what we have talked about. And I really think that's a great idea, putting it with the installer stuff, because it is something that happens to us. Just we getting caught in the middle between the real estate transactions. People come in here, they're freaked out. My system's failing. My system's failing. Well, I'm not writing you an order and calling that down. It's different. I'm glad that you teach it that way, Bob, though. I really am. Thank you for the bottom of mine and sanitarians in this office is heart. Next question, guys, because I think that's it. Peter, is there another slide? No, next step. So literally, we referred out, went on the agenda. We've referred out quite a few questions, put it on the back burner. So we're really only talking about I think, 3 or 4 points of what we're actually developing into recommendations. Initial training, continuing education, installers being in a separate category. We're going to add on that whole failure versus malfunctioning part in there somehow, some way. Rob is going to send me the perfect statement for question 4. And
How about send me the slide so I have it as reference?
I will absolutely do it. Long-term.
And I thought it was not 4, I thought it was before that.
Was it before that?
Like, I thought it was 2A, 2B or something like that.
Well, one was the initial training, 2A and 2B, only because I'm looking at it. I'll send it over to you.
Just
3
send me a
was
little.
soil scientist. That's it. Sorry.
Right, I wasn't going to address that. I was going to address the CEUs and the initial training piece.
Oh, sorry. Okay, you're right. I'm going to have to deal with the 4 then. That was one I didn't want to do. All right, so thank you, Rob, for that. Yes, you're right, continuing education. Then we have the soil short-term encourage, long-term evaluate, soil evaluator. And then question 4 is about the codes and standards. And 5, we already talked about it. We don't even really have to say that you need to have a searchable database. They already know that. It's more of a funding thing. The other ones that we sent over to the Nitrogen Environment Committee, and then the ones that funding, and that's it. So there's really only three, I think 3 to 4 things that we're actually writing up. See? It all ended up coming together. And we pretty much have consensus on most of the 3 or 4 items that we are writing about. Does anyone have any other things they want to bring up? I know we went over time and I do apologize. So I'm going to take a crack at writing some of this stuff, and I'll try to send it out probably the day before, because that's where I'm at right now, guys. I'm a little busy, I'm sorry. But I'll send it over and we can take a look at it and send it to the whole group. Please, it's gonna be draft, completely draft. Rip it up as much as you want. I've never done this before, like written. I know my grammar, my typos, but I've never written one of these things before, so I'm sure it'll be great when all of us are through with it. I just take a stab at starting it. All right. And then that is it. We meet Wednesday, 9, I think it was 9 in the morning, and I'll get an agenda out before then. And I think we're on the right path, guys. I mean, like I said, 3 or 4 items, that's not bad after everything that we talked through.
It's
Yeah.
good.
All right.
All right.
Good.
All right. We're getting there. All right, guys. You have a lovely day, and I am so sorry for keeping you past 3, and we will see each other on Wednesday.